The courtroom was humming with tension, the kind that settles like a heavy fog over every corner of a room. Journalists jostled for position near the front, cameras perched on tripods like silent sentinels, their lenses trained on the polished mahogany benches where the accused and their attorneys waited. The judge's gavel rested on the podium, a silent promise of authority, while the stenographer's fingers flew across the keys, capturing every syllable with mechanical precision. It was a case that had gripped the city for months, high-profile, complicated, and fraught with emotion. The public had followed every twist in the investigation, every rumor, every leaked detail. But no one, absolutely no one, was prepared for what walked into the room that morning. She came in quietly, almost as if she knew she didn't belong. A 3-year-old girl, no taller than the courthouse benches, her small hand clutching a stuffed rabbit whose fur was matted from years of comfort and companionship. She wore a pale yellow dress that had once been crisp and perfect but was now softly frayed at the hem, and her tiny shoes tapped against the marble floor with a nervous rhythm. At her side was a massive police K9 named Titan. The dog's coat gleamed under the courtroom lights, dark and sleek, his posture rigid and alert, the kind of alertness only trained service animals possess. There was a sense of gravity in the way he moved, a silent confidence that contradicted the sheer adorableness of the child beside him. The murmurs started almost immediately. Lawyers stopped mid-gesture, their papers trembling in their hands. Reporters whispered into microphones, trying to make sense of the unlikely pair, a toddler and a dog, entering a room reserved for legal battle and adult seriousness. Titan's nose twitched, ears pricked as though he sensed the energy in the room. He was calm, yet every muscle hinted at readiness. The girl, meanwhile, kept her gaze fixed on something unseen to the rest of the courtroom, her small hand brushing Titan's collar as if grounding herself in his presence. Her mother hovered behind her, panic and pride warring on her face. She wanted to step forward to pull her daughter back, but she hesitated, sensing something extraordinary in the moment. The father, seated a few feet away, felt his chest tighten. He had watched his daughter grow, had seen the glimpses of brilliance and intuition in her eyes, but even he was unprepared for what was about to happen. The room, oblivious to the family's private history, waited in suspended disbelief. Then she spoke. 2 words, whispered so softly, they might have been missed if not for the dead silence that seemed to press down on the courtroom. The words hung in the air, vibrating in the space between disbelief and comprehension. Find him. The effect was instantaneous. The courtroom collectively inhaled, a synchronized gasp that reverberated off the marble walls. The judge froze mid-sentence, gavel raised, eyes wide as he tried to reconcile the innocence of the voice with the authority embedded in those 2 words. Lawyers stopped scribbling, pens hovering in midair. Titan's ears swiveled, tail stiffening like a banner of alertness. The dog's head tilted slightly, eyes locked on the girl as if acknowledging a command only he could understand. It wasn't just words, it was an invocation, a summons. The energy shifted, the room charged with anticipation, tension so thick it was almost visible. People exchanged glances, confused, anxious, awestruck. A veteran officer standing near the back whispered under his breath, She said what? His partner shook his head, eyes never leaving the dog and child, every instinct screaming that this was more than coincidence. The girl stepped forward, her tiny fingers brushing Titan's collar again. She repeated the words just as softly, just as commanding. Find him. Her mother's lips parted in a gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. Memories, fragments of months she had tried to forget, flashed across her mind. Her daughter's uncanny ability to notice the smallest details, the way she had once found a missing puppy in a yard full of hiding places, the almost supernatural way she seemed to recall patterns and faces months after seeing them. But this was a courtroom, a place of law, a place where miracles weren't supposed to happen, and yet here it was. Titan moved. Just a fraction at first, a subtle shift of weight, a barely audible growl deep in his chest, and then a more deliberate step toward the aisle. Every eye followed, and suddenly the world seemed to shrink down to the narrow corridor leading to the judge's bench. the walls echoing with the subtle rhythm of tiny footsteps and the heavy padding of paws on marble. The child's eyes never left the dog. There was no fear in them, only focus, a clarity that belied her age. The judge leaned forward, squinting. "Excuse me, did the child just command the K9?" His voice was barely steady. Murmurs erupted, a flurry of whispered questions and astonished exclamations. Reporters scrambled, cameras clicked, and the stenographer paused mid-word, unsure if she was recording the proceedings or a scene from a movie. The father's hand clenched the edge of his chair, knuckles white. He had always known she was different, but he had never imagined this moment. His little girl, commanding attention and obedience from a trained police dog in the most formal place in the city, with the entire courtroom watching. And yet, there she was, standing with an authority no one could explain. No one moved. No one dared speak. The tension was electric, as though the air itself had been charged with some unseen current. Titan's tail twitched, a signal that the chain of events had begun, that something hidden, something dangerous or lost, was about to surface. The child's small frame seemed impossibly resolute, a living beacon of instinct and intelligence. Then came a small sound, a click of a camera, a cough from the back of the room, but it was enough to break the spell just slightly. The girl's mother stepped forward, voice trembling as she whispered to the judge, "Your Honor, she's not just saying words, she knows." The courtroom froze again. Knives of curiosity and dread pierced every observer's mind. What could a 3-year-old know? How could a child, and a dog, possess information that no adult had, that the court itself could not access? The air was thick with suspense, heavy and almost suffocating. Every heartbeat echoed in the polished floors. Every pair of eyes followed the tiny figure standing at the center of what was rapidly becoming an unbelievable scene. And then, almost imperceptibly, Titan's head turned toward the far end of the room, ears upright, nostrils flaring. The girl noticed it, too. She took a cautious step forward, her tiny hand lifting as though guiding him, as though directing the invisible threads of a story only they understood. No one spoke. No one moved, everyone waited, holding their breath. And then the girl whispered again, still just 2 words, but now with a weight that made the entire room lean forward in anticipation. "Over there." A cold shiver ran through the courtroom. Every adult instinct screamed that something extraordinary and possibly dangerous was about to unfold. And in that moment the world seemed to pause. Outside, the city continued unaware. Inside, the stage was set for a story no one could have imagined. Suspense hook. Where was there? What could a toddler and a K9 possibly see that everyone else could? And what was about to be revealed in the silence of a courtroom that was no longer just a place of law, but a stage for something far more extraordinary? The courtroom seemed to shrink in on itself. Every person suddenly aware that the gravity of the moment was bigger than any legal battle they had ever witnessed. The walls, the polished oak benches, even the towering columns, everything faded into the background. There was only her, a 3-year-old girl with a stuffed rabbit clutched in one hand, and Titan, the K9, standing like a sentinel beside her, muscles taut and eyes fixed on a point only they could see. "Over there," she whispered again, her voice softer but insistent, trembling only slightly as though even she couldn't fully understand what she was commanding. Her tiny finger extended toward a section of the courtroom that had seemed mundane just moments before. Papers stacked neatly on a corner table, folders forgotten in the shuffle of lawyers' hands, a briefcase that had sat in the same place for days, all ordinary. But to her, to Titan, to the thread of memory woven into her young mind, it was the epicenter of something hidden, something urgent. The room erupted into nervous whispers. Reporters leaned forward, cameras pivoting, microphones straining to capture every syllable. "Is she pointing to evidence?" one of them muttered. Another shook his head as if shaking out the disbelief. "It can't be, she's 3 years old." The judge leaned forward in his seat, a faint crease forming between his brows. "Counselor," he called to the prosecuting attorney. "Did this child say something to the K-9?" His voice, measured but incredulous, carried authority, yet even he couldn't hide the quaver of astonishment. Titan, seemingly aware of every nuance, growled low in his throat, not aggressive, not warning, but like a note of agreement, a signal that the words had meaning far beyond the child's age. Her mother's hand shot forward, fingers trembling as she gripped the child's shoulders. "Your Honor," she said, voice barely above a whisper, she remembers. "She sees things adults don't. Please just watch." The courtroom went still again, like the world had taken a collective breath. Titan took a step forward, and the 3-year-old followed instinctively, tiny feet shuffling against the marble floor, heels clicking lightly. Security officers shifted uneasily, unsure whether to intervene or wait. Some of them were veterans, hardened by years of crime scenes, threats, and tense standoffs. But even they paused, struck silent by the surreal coordination between child and dog. She stopped at the edge of a side table, her gaze locking on a manila folder lying half-hidden under a pile of legal documents. Titan lowered his massive head, nose twitching as he sniffed the air. The girl leaned closer, small hands reaching for the folder, her lips parting slightly as if summoning courage from an invisible source. Then, with a precision that sent shivers down everyone's spine, she tugged at the folder. Titan barked softly, almost approvingly, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged room like a drumbeat of acknowledgement. The prosecuting attorney, a tall man with a reputation for calm under pressure, stepped forward hesitantly. "Ma'am, young lady, what exactly are you doing?" His voice was polite, but the tremor betrayed him. He was speaking to a child who seemed to hold a secret no adult could decipher, commanding a trained police dog with the certainty of a general leading troops. The girl's voice barely rose above a whisper. "It's him, the papers, he hid it." A ripple of confusion ran through the courtroom. "He? Who?" One of the defense attorneys muttered, pen poised but unmoving, eyes wide. The judge leaned back, trying to mask the rising disbelief that threatened to overtake decorum. Titan, however, needed no explanation. His nose pressed to the folder and he barked again, louder this time, tail stiff, eyes unblinking. The room felt like it was suspended in time. Every adult in the courtroom, the reporters, the officers, the lawyers, the judge, knew instinctively that something extraordinary was happening, yet no one could fully comprehend it. All eyes turned to the father, seated a few rows back. His face was pale, lines of worry deepened into etched furrows. He had always known his daughter was special, but even he had never imagined her intuition would manifest in such a public, dramatic way. Her mother stepped closer to the table, kneeling slightly to be eye level with her child. "Honey, do you remember?" she asked gently. The girl nodded, eyes bright, her hand brushing Titan's collar as if drawing courage from his steady presence. "I saw him. He left it there." Titan barked again, louder now, and the room collectively flinched. The sound reverberated off the walls, drawing attention from every corner. Reporters fumbled with their cameras, capturing the strange choreography. A child guiding a massive police dog, leading him to a folder, pointing to evidence that had eluded professionals for weeks. The judge cleared his throat, trying to reassert control. "Miss, young lady, are you saying you know where something important is hidden?" The girl nodded. She reached for the folder, tugged it free, and held it up with both hands. Her arms were tiny, barely strong enough to support the weight, yet she held it steadily, as if presenting a trophy. Titan's eyes never left her face, chest rising and falling slowly, tail flicking with restrained excitement. Murmurs erupted. Lawyers whispered to each other. Journalists muttered to their cameras. The courtroom had transformed from a place of law and order to a stage of disbelief and awe. Nobody could explain what they had just witnessed. How could a 3-year-old know where critical evidence was hidden? How could Titan respond to a child's instructions with such precision and understanding? The prosecuting attorney stepped forward cautiously, voice shaking. We need to secure that folder immediately. Chain of custody." The child interrupted with another whisper, calm and unwavering. "Wait, he's not finished." The courtroom froze. "Not finished," the judge repeated, incredulous. "Who isn't finished?" The girl looked at Titan and he growled low but not threateningly, a deep, resonant sound that seemed almost like a growl of agreement, of anticipation. She held up the folder, then pointed toward a small vent near the floor on the opposite side of the room. "He put more." The gasp was collective. Papers rustled. Cameras clicked frantically. Officers exchanged hurried glances, some moving toward the vent, others frozen in disbelief. The idea that a 3-year-old could direct a trained police dog to evidence hidden in a courtroom was already unbelievable. The suggestion that there was more hidden, more secret, more critical, sent adrenaline surging through everyone present. Titan moved first, stepping carefully toward the vent, nose twitching, ears forward. The girl followed, guiding him gently but with unshakable authority. The mother whispered softly, reassuring, proud yet terrified. "Be careful," she murmured, as if the child's small hands and the dog's massive frame could be undone by fate itself. The father's hands clenched his knees, heart pounding. This was his daughter, his miracle child, performing a feat no adult could. And yet beneath the awe, a pulse of fear ran through him. What exactly were they about to find? What had been hidden so carefully, and why? Titan stopped at the vent. The girl knelt, tiny fingers brushing the grate. She whispered once more, almost reverently, "Here." The courtroom leaned in. Every pair of eyes fixed on the spot, every camera trained, every microphone turned. And then Titan pawed at the vent, a low whine escaping his throat. The judge, for the first time in decades on the bench, felt his stomach knot in disbelief. A small metallic click echoed from inside the vent. Titan barked, more urgently this time. The girl looked at him, eyes wide with a mix of triumph and fear. She whispered, "Open it." An officer stepped forward cautiously, kneeling beside the child, hands trembling as he reached for the vent cover. Papers rustled again, pens fell from trembling hands. The weight of anticipation pressed down on everyone. And then, just as the cover was about to lift, the girl's voice rang out one final time, loud and clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Don't touch it yet." The room froze. Every adult held their breath. Every officer froze mid-action. Titan lowered his head, growled softly, tail stiff. The girl's tiny figure trembled slightly, but her eyes were sharp, focused, almost commanding. Every person in the courtroom suddenly understood one terrifying truth. Whatever was hidden, whatever the child and the dog had uncovered, it was bigger than anyone had imagined. And for the first time, the question on everyone's mind wasn't who had hidden it, but what would happen if they opened it. Suspense hook. What was inside the vent? Why did the toddler know not to let anyone touch it? And how could a 3-year-old and a dog see what every trained adult had missed? The courtroom had gone utterly silent, the kind of silence that presses against the ribs and makes every breath feel heavier. The metallic echo of Titan's low growl lingered in the air, a warning that something unseen had been disturbed. The judge, who prided himself on composure through decades of trials, leaned forward, palms pressed together, eyes locked on the small figure kneeling in front of the vent. Reporters held their cameras mid-zoom, microphones inches from the floor, all of them collectively holding their breath as if the room itself were suspended in time. The girl's mother stepped forward cautiously, kneeling beside her daughter. Her hands hovered just above the toddler's tiny shoulders, trembling slightly, not from fear but from the weight of understanding. She had always known her daughter was different, but until now, that difference had never manifested in such a public, almost miraculous display. "Honey, do you remember?" she whispered. The child's fingers lingered on the vent cover, small knuckles white. Her wide eyes met her mother, filled with a clarity that no adult could have anticipated. "I saw him," she said softly, voice barely audible. He left it here. I know where." "Who left it? Who are you talking about?" her mother asked, voice trembling. She felt a shiver run down her spine, a premonition that the next revelation would change everything. The toddler's gaze shifted toward Titan, who crouched slightly, muscles taut, eyes never leaving her. The man, she whispered, he was hiding it. The judge leaned back, frowning, trying to process what he was hearing. "Ma'am," he said to the mother, "you're suggesting that your child saw someone hiding critical evidence months ago." His tone was skeptical, but there was an undercurrent of unease. Adults are trained to dismiss improbable explanations, but even the most cynical observer could see that Titan's reaction could not be faked. Outside, the muffled chaos of news crews and spectators waiting to glimpse the unfolding drama reached a crescendo. Inside, the courtroom had transformed from a place of law into a stage of intrigue, the kind usually reserved for thrillers or documentaries. But this was real. And the evidence, the hidden folder, was the pivot point of a mystery no one had yet dared to fully unravel. The father rose from his seat, his hands gripping the back of a bench for support. He was pale, every line of his face etched with anxiety and disbelief. She's not lying," he said quietly, almost to himself. "She remembers everything. She sees what adults miss." His words were barely audible, yet in that silence they carried the weight of truth. The mother nodded, swallowing hard. "She has a memory," she whispered. "A memory I never thought I'd see used like this." Her voice broke slightly as she recalled past moments. The missing puppy she had found at age 2, the way she remembered streets, houses, faces in intricate detail. But this was different. This was real, dangerous, and utterly unpredictable. Titan shifted again, the muscles along his back rippling as he sniffed the vent with precision. His massive paws pawed at the edges, and he let out a low bark, his gaze flicking to the toddler as though seeking permission. She nodded, tiny hand brushing his coat. "Be careful," she whispered, not to him, but almost to the unseen presence she was sure lingered in the shadows of memory and time. The judge, trying to regain composure, cleared his throat. "Officer, you need to secure that vent. Whatever is inside, it is evidence. Chain of custody protocols." The girl shook her head, tiny hands raised. "Wait," she said, almost commanding. He wants you to see it last." A murmur spread across the room. The prosecuting attorney stepped forward, brows knit. "Your Honor, what does that mean? Evidence has to be handled immediately. We can't." "SHH," the girl interrupted, holding up one finger, her eyes wide and urgent. "Please wait." The tension in the room was palpable. Every adult instinct screamed to ignore her, to follow protocol, to treat this as a simple legal proceeding. But every person in the courtroom, trained attorneys, officers, reporters, and the judge himself, felt a thread of unease, a gnawing curiosity that made rational thought fade in the face of the inexplicable. Then, as if summoned by her words, memories began surfacing, not just in the girl but in the minds of her parents. The mother recalled the day 3 months prior when her daughter had wandered too close to a man in the courthouse lobby during a visit. The man had been distracted, hurried, almost desperate. She remembered the way her daughter had stared at him, silent, unblinking, memorizing the movements of his hands, the glance he cast at a nondescript briefcase. At the time, it had seemed like a child's idle fascination, but now, it was clear she had remembered every detail. The father remembered something else, the K-9 training sessions he had taken Titan to. Titan was trained to follow commands, to detect scent, to locate objects, but never had the dog responded to a child in this way. Something about her tone, her instinct, her memory, had unlocked a connection that defied explanation. Titan's reaction wasn't just obedience, it was recognition, almost reverence. The girl knelt by the vent, brushing her fingers over the small metal grate. "I saw where he hid it," she whispered again. "He thought I wouldn't notice, but I did." Titan growled softly, nuzzling her shoulder with his massive head. The sound was protective, affirming, as if to say, "We are together in this, and we will see it through." The judge exchanged a look with the lead officer. "Very well," he said, voice measured but heavy with apprehension. But if we are to proceed, it must be done carefully. Officer, prepare to remove the vent cover. Gently. As the officer knelt, the girl leaned closer to Titan, her lips brushing his fur. He didn't want you to touch it first, she murmured. He wanted you to know I found it. Her words were soft, but they carried weight beyond comprehension. Every person in the room felt it, the quiet authority of a child guiding events beyond her years. The vent cover clicked as the officer began to lift it, a sound that seemed to echo like a gunshot in the tense silence. Titan's body tensed, ears forward, tail stiff. The girl's hand hovered over the opening, as if ready to intervene. The first glimpse of what lay inside made everyone in the room inhale sharply. A bundle of papers, bound with a simple rubber band, sat inside the vent. At first glance, they looked ordinary, legal documents, evidence folders, but the careful observer could see markings, annotations, and scribbles that suggested something far more significant than anyone had anticipated. The girl leaned in closer, tiny hands hovering over the bundle. They're his, she said softly. The man, he wanted to hide it, but I saw. The judge swallowed hard. Ma'am, young lady, do you understand what you've just uncovered? His voice was steady, but the tremor in his hands betrayed the weight of disbelief. The toddler nodded, small brows furrowed. I remembered, he didn't know I would. A hush fell over the room. Reporters and lawyers alike were frozen, grappling with the impossible reality. A 3-year-old had discovered evidence that adults had overlooked, that had eluded trained investigators. Titan barked once, sharply, as if punctuating the revelation. His eyes locked on the child, protective, loyal, and completely attuned. But then the girl's voice, small yet unwavering, cut through the tension. There's more. The courtroom collectively gasped. Papers rustled, pens dropped. Every adult instinct screamed disbelief, yet the truth of the moment was undeniable. Whatever had been hidden, whatever had been discovered, it was only the beginning. Titan growled low again, the sound vibrating through the marble floor, and the girl's eyes met her mother with a silent plea. Are you ready? The mother swallowed hard, heart pounding, and nodded. The father clenched his fists, white-knuckled, and took a shaky breath. The judge leaned forward, all the skepticism in the world colliding with the undeniable reality before him. And in that moment, everyone understood one terrifying truth. What they were about to uncover could change everything. Suspense hook. Who was the man hiding the evidence? What secrets did the papers hold? And why did the child and Titan seem to sense danger before anyone else in the room could? The story had only just begun, and the most shocking revelations were still waiting to emerge. The courtroom felt electric, every heartbeat in sync with the tension radiating from the small figure kneeling by the vent. Titan's ears pricked, his massive body coiled like a spring, tail stiff. The girl's tiny hands hovered over the hidden bundle of papers, her eyes scanning the room, alert to threats invisible to everyone else. She whispered to Titan, low and steady, "Go." And just like that, the unthinkable happened. Titan bolted, not a staggered sprint, not a clumsy dash, but a controlled, precise, forceful surge. His powerful legs propelled him down the center aisle, polished floors echoing with each thundering paw step. The girl giggled, squealed, and ran after him, her tiny shoes clattering against the marble. A security officer lunged to keep pace, but even he struggled to match Titan's speed and the girl's uncanny coordination with him. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Lawyers shouted for calm, microphones clattered to the floor, and reporters scrambled to capture every second of the unfolding spectacle. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order, but the gavel sounded hollow in the face of this bizarre tableau. A toddler leading a K-9 on what could only be described as a precision mission, right through the heart of the courthouse. Whispers filled the room. Who is she? What's going on? How does a 3-year-old do this? Outside the courtroom, staff and visitors froze, watching the pair dash past them. Titan's nose twitched in the air, guiding them with a purpose that defied explanation. The girl's little legs pumped with determination, her rabbit clutched tightly under one arm, the other hand brushing Titan's shoulder as if she were steering a vessel through turbulent waters. The security team followed in a growing line, officers calling for calm, for order. But Titan ignored them. He led the girl through hallways no one had anticipated, twisting around corners with uncanny precision, paws skidding slightly on polished tiles. The little girl navigated behind him, eyes wide with exhilaration and fear, a mix of trust and instinct that made her movements seem preternaturally synchronized with the dog. Finally, they reached a side corridor dimly lit and lined with storage closets. Titan paused, nose quivering as he sniffed the air, ears forward. The girl stopped beside him, her small hand pressing against his massive flank. "Here," she whispered, her voice low but urgent. Titan's tail flicked, and he pawed at the wall near a maintenance door. An officer, panting from the chase, arrived just behind them. What's here?" he asked, his voice trembling. Titan growled softly, protective, warning, almost saying, "Back off. Only she knows." The girl reached up, tiny fingers pressing the latch on the maintenance door. It swung open with a creak, revealing a small utility closet, dust motes floating in the shafts of light from the hallway. And inside there it was. A small, nondescript box, taped shut, sitting in the corner. It had been tucked away in the shadows, overlooked countless times by investigators and courthouse staff. But the girl had seen it. Titan had smelled it. Together, they had followed instinct and memory to its exact location. The officers gasped. The reporters whispered, phones raised, capturing every moment. The girl knelt before the box, brushing off dust with her tiny hands. "It's him," she said softly. "He hid it here." The father, finally arriving at the corridor, stumbled over his own feet, breathless. He looked at his daughter with awe and terror. How did you know?" he asked, voice breaking. His wife clutched his arm, equally stunned. They both felt the gravity of the moment, understanding that this wasn't mere luck. It was memory, intuition, and a bond with Titan that defied reason. Titan barked once, sharply, almost as if to punctuate the revelation, his eyes never leaving the girl's face. She smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and anxiety, and reached for the box. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tugged at the tape. Dust rose around her, particles floating in the narrow beam of light from the hallway. And then it happened. A faint rustle echoed from the far side of the closet. The girl froze. Titan's body stiffened, ears erect, muscles coiling like springs. Someone or something was inside the courthouse with them, moving in the shadows, unseen but unmistakably present. The officers instinctively raised their weapons, and the girl's mother whispered, almost in prayer, "Be careful, honey, be careful." The toddler's eyes narrowed. "He didn't want anyone to see it yet," she murmured. "We have to wait." Titan growled low, warning, protective. The officers glanced at each other, realizing that the child's instincts might be more reliable than their own training. And then, without warning, the shadow shifted closer. A tall figure emerging from the darkness, face obscured, hands moving toward the box. The girl's tiny voice rang out, steady and commanding despite her age. "No." Titan leapt forward, massive paws landing with authority on the floor, and the man froze. The officers lunged simultaneously, but the tension in the room was palpable. The child had stopped an adult who could have been dangerous, without a single threat, without a single weapon. The man froze, glancing from Titan to the toddler, realization dawning in his eyes. You saw me," he whispered, panic lacing his voice. The girl nodded. "I saw everything, you hid it, but Titan, he knows too." Titan growled again, and the man's shoulders sagged, knowing there was no escape. The girl, small but resolute, reached down and tugged the box toward her. Her fingers brushed the contents, and the air seemed to thrum with the weight of discovery. The officers moved in, securing the man while the girl and Titan remained the central figures, calm and in control amid the chaos. Her mother finally stepped forward, hugging her daughter as the toddler held the box, eyes bright with triumph and fear. "You did it," she whispered, voice shaking. "You actually did it." The father, still panting, looked at Titan with awe. "You too saved this case, saved everything." His words carried disbelief, pride, and an unspoken fear of what could have gone wrong. But the girl's eyes were already scanning the room, cautious and alert. He isn't finished," she whispered. "There's more." The courtroom staff, still arriving in disarray from the initial chaos, paused, realizing that the chase was far from over. Titan barked again, tail stiff, muscles coiled. The girl clutched her stuffed rabbit in the box, taking a step forward, eyes scanning the shadows. Everyone understood instinctively that the story wasn't done. Whatever secrets were hidden in the courthouse, whatever the man had tried to conceal, had only begun to surface. And the child, no more than 3 years old, had led the way. The reporters were already typing, live feeds capturing the unfolding drama, phones recording every word. But the significance of what had just happened wasn't fully realized yet. A toddler had directed a trained K-9 through a maze of halls and hidden rooms, uncovering evidence that could topple careers, expose criminals, and change lives. And now, standing in the dim light of the utility closet, the girl whispered again, a low, urgent tone. "There's more, we have to follow him." Titan's ears twitched, tail stiffened, and the officers exchanged uneasy glances. The small child had just issued a command that no one expected, but everyone instinctively knew it wasn't a suggestion. The chase wasn't over. Suspense hook. Where would Titan and the girl lead them next? What other secrets had the man hidden, and how far would the toddler go to uncover them? The hunt was only beginning, and no one in the courthouse could predict what they would find. The air in the dimly lit utility closet felt thick, heavy with dust, and the faint metallic tang of adrenaline. Titan stood rigid, massive paws planted firmly on the scuffed tile, tail swaying with restrained energy. The girl's tiny fingers hovered over the box, brushing off dust as if revealing something sacred. Her rabbit tucked under one arm, she seemed almost unaware of the officers and courthouse staff crowding around the doorway, all of them straining to see what had been hidden in plain sight for months. The box was small, unassuming, taped shut with yellowing masking tape. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than old files someone had carelessly abandoned. But the girl's gaze, sharp and unwavering, betrayed an intuition far beyond her years. She squinted at a small corner of the box where faint markings were barely visible. "It's him," she whispered, tiny voice echoing in the narrow space. "He left a clue. He wanted you to find it, but only if you saw it the right way." Titan growled low, a deep, resonant sound vibrating through the floor. Every officer and staff member took a small step back, sensing the gravity of what was happening. This wasn't just evidence. They were on the verge of discovering a hidden trail, a breadcrumb left intentionally by someone clever, cunning, and desperate. The father's face was pale, sweat beading at his temple. How do you know that?" he asked quietly, voice thick with disbelief. He crouched beside his daughter, peering over her shoulder. His eyes flicked between her small hands and Titan's alert stance. He didn't ask why. At this point, he had learned not to question the instincts that had guided them this far. The mother swallowed hard, lips trembling. She just knows," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She glanced at the judge, who had finally arrived at the scene after frantic calls from security. The man's gavel was still in his hand, but he held it loosely, jaw tight, as he took in the tableau before him. A 3-year-old girl, a massive K-9, and a box that had eluded professionals for months. The girl reached inside the box carefully, her small fingers brushing against the edges of paper bundles. Titan leaned slightly forward, nose twitching, ears pricked. The room seemed to shrink around them, the world condensing to the moment of discovery. She pulled out a folder, its corners bent and worn. The top sheet had scribbles and symbols, almost indecipherable to an untrained eye. The girl studied them for a moment, tilting her head, brow furrowed. Then she whispered, "It's a map of where he kept the rest." The officers exchanged startled glances. One murmured, "A map, he hid more evidence." Another, veteran of countless investigations, muttered under his breath, "And a 3-year-old just figured it out before us." The girl's tiny voice rose slightly, urgent and insistent. "Look at the marks. They match the hallway tiles. And the smell," she paused, brushing her fingers across Titan's neck as if drawing strength from him. "Titan knows it too. He can smell the rest." Titan growled low, tail stiff, nose twitching. The officers watched in disbelief as he pawed the floor, sniffing along the edges of the tiles, the air thick with a mix of curiosity and tension. The girl followed his movements, whispering instructions, pointing to spots that no adult had considered significant. The room's whispers grew, journalists recording live feeds, microphones straining to catch her words. The father knelt beside the girl, voice shaking. You're leading him to the rest?" he asked, awe and fear colliding. He couldn't wrap his head around the coordination between child and K9. The girl nodded. "He's smart," she said, "but he's left signs we just have to follow." The mother shivered. Signs? How does she even know to see them? The girl didn't answer directly. Instead, she leaned closer to Titan, whispering, "This way." The dog followed instantly, moving toward a narrow corridor lined with maintenance doors and old storage closets. Every officer instinctively followed, guns holstered but hands ready, keeping a safe distance. The journalists trailed behind, cameras filming the extraordinary procession. The hallway was eerily quiet, lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs. Titan's nose pressed to the floor, sniffing and pausing, then moving again. The girl's tiny hand brushed along the wall, tapping faint marks that only she noticed. It was as if she could read the building itself, deciphering the hidden language that no adult had ever perceived. Finally, Titan stopped in front of a small metal grate near the floor. He pawed at it lightly, ears forward, and let out a low bark. The girl knelt, peering inside. Her eyes widened and she whispered almost to herself, "Here it is." The father leaned closer, his heart hammering. "What is it?" The girl's small fingers reached into the grate, pulling out another bundle of papers, even more carefully concealed than the last. The officer nearest her gasped, This is incredible. We've been looking for this for months." The girl held the papers up, tiny arms trembling. He didn't want anyone to find it, but I saw him. I remembered." Her voice was soft but commanding, filled with the certainty of someone who had seen the truth. Titan nudged her gently, nose brushing her shoulder. The girl whispered, "Good boy, you knew too." The connection between them was palpable, a silent understanding that no words could capture. The officers and reporters watched in awe, realizing that this toddler had not only uncovered evidence but had essentially directed a search that would have taken adults weeks, if not months, to figure out. The judge arrived, leaning on a nearby railing, his face pale but determined. "Miss, young lady, do you understand the significance of what you've done?" he asked, voice heavy with disbelief. The girl nodded. "I saw it. Titan knew too. We just followed him." The mother's eyes filled with tears. "My little girl, she couldn't finish. Pride, fear, and disbelief collided in her chest. The father reached for his daughter's hand, holding it gently. "You've changed everything," he whispered. Suddenly, a faint noise from the far end of the hallway froze everyone in place. Papers rustled, a door clicked. The man who had hidden the evidence, desperate, cunning, and dangerous, was still in the building. The chase, it seemed, was far from over. The girl's eyes met Titan's. "He's here," she whispered. The dog growled low, massive body tense, ears forward. The officers instinctively readied themselves, moving in a coordinated line while the journalists tried to capture every second without interfering. The girl held up her small hands. "Wait, we need to be smart, we can't just rush." The tension in the hallway was suffocating. Every step echoed like a drumbeat of impending confrontation. The bundle of papers, the map, the hidden evidence. They were all pieces of a puzzle that no one could yet see in full. And the girl, no more than 3, had become the unlikely leader of the operation. Then she whispered the words that made every adult in the hallway freeze. "He's hiding more, and it's dangerous." Titan growled, teeth bared slightly, a warning. The girl took a small, deliberate step forward, tiny shoes clicking on the tiles. Her eyes scanned the shadows, searching for the next clue. The officers followed cautiously, adrenaline surging, fully aware that they were now participants in a high-stakes chase orchestrated by a toddler and a dog. The father exhaled shakily. This is beyond anything I could have imagined," he murmured. The mother placed her hands on her daughter's shoulders, heart hammering. "We need to trust her and Titan." The girl smiled faintly, a mix of pride and focus, and whispered again, "We're almost there." And in that moment, every adult in the hallway understood one terrifying truth. Whatever lay ahead could change everything, and the child and the K9 were the only ones who truly knew the way. Suspense hook. What was the next hidden clue? How much more had the man left behind, and what dangers awaited those who followed? The chase was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The hallway felt impossibly narrow as the small convoy moved forward. Titan led the way, paws silent against the polished tile, nose quivering as he traced the faintest scent trails left by someone desperate to hide their secrets. The girl clutched her stuffed rabbit and the bundle of papers, her eyes wide with focus, scanning shadows that adults would have dismissed as empty space. Behind them, officers held their positions, weapons at the ready, breath shallow with anticipation. Journalists strained to record every moment without interfering, their cameras catching the almost cinematic tableau unfolding before them. Every step carried the weight of suspense. Every turn could reveal a clue or a trap. The girl whispered to Titan, tiny fingers brushing against his fur, guiding him with an instinct no one could explain. "Here," she murmured. Titan barked softly, low and approving, before nudging her forward. They reached a storage room at the far end of the corridor. Its door was slightly ajar, a gap barely wide enough to suggest movement inside. Dust motes danced in the narrow beam of light filtering from the hallway, and the faint odor of paper and metal hinted at secrets long concealed. The girl knelt before the door, tiny hands gripping the edge, and whispered, "He's in here." The officers froze, a collective intake of breath sounding louder than the fluorescent hum above. One of them, a veteran of countless raids, whispered, "He's still here, after all this. How is this even possible?" Titan growled low, tail stiff, every muscle coiled for action. The girl's tiny hand pressed lightly against his flank. "We have to see," she said. The simplicity of her words belied the tension in her tone, the calm certainty of someone who had already seen more than anyone else in the room could imagine. Her mother, voice trembling, whispered, "Be careful, honey. We don't know what he's capable of." The father's hand gripped hers for a moment, giving a reassuring squeeze. "We trust you," he said quietly, heart hammering. "And Titan." The girl slid the door open slightly. Inside, the storage room was cluttered with stacks of boxes, forgotten office supplies, and crates labeled with dusty dates. But among the clutter, the telltale signs appeared. Folders with markings identical to the ones she had already discovered, papers scattered with notes only a cunning mind could produce. And at the far corner of the room, a man crouched, hurriedly attempting to conceal more evidence. He froze when he saw them, Titan, massive and alert, and the girl, tiny but unflinching, clutching her rabbit and the previously recovered bundle. His eyes darted around, panic overtaking his features. How did you?" he stammered. The girl's voice was calm, almost chilling in its authority. "I saw you. I remembered everything." Titan growled, a deep, protective sound that vibrated through the floor and walls. The man's shoulders slumped slightly, realizing there was no escape. The officers stepped in cautiously, surrounding him, but it was clear they were secondary players in this unfolding drama. The toddler and the dog had led them here. They had orchestrated the discovery. The girl moved closer, her small hands brushing against the scattered papers. She bent over, her fingers tracing the markings and annotations. "This is it," she said softly. "This is everything he tried to hide." Her mother's hands flew to her mouth, tears brimming. "Oh my God," she whispered. "All of it, she actually found all of it." The father knelt beside her daughter, eyes wide with awe. You've changed everything," he murmured. He was barely breathing, unable to process the enormity of what had just happened. The man, still crouched, finally spoke, voice trembling with desperation. You don't understand what you're holding. Do you know what this proves? Do you know who's involved?" The girl looked up at him, eyes sharp and unwavering. "I know, I saw. Titan knows too." Titan growled again, a sound that was equal parts warning and assertion. The man's face paled. He finally raised his hands in surrender. All right. You've seen it all," he whispered. "But you don't understand the danger." The officers stepped closer, securing him while the journalists tried to capture every word. But everyone's attention remained fixed on the girl and Titan. Their unlikely teamwork, their unflinching precision, their courage in the face of a man who had hidden secrets that could topple lives. The girl bent over the pile of papers, spreading them carefully. Maps, annotated documents, photographs, everything pointed to a network of deception that went far beyond a simple courthouse case. Her tiny hands moved methodically, as if understanding the significance of each sheet. Titan remained by her side, protective and alert, tail flicking occasionally, eyes never leaving her movements. The mother finally stepped closer, voice shaking. "Honey, what does it say? Can you explain?" The girl looked up briefly, small face serious. "He was hiding money, a lot of money, and evidence of crimes, big ones. People who think they're untouchable, they're not, but he tried to hide it." The officers gasped, realizing the implications. The papers weren't just minor legal documents. They were proof of a fraud scheme so intricate and extensive that it had stumped investigators for months. The judge, finally stepping closer, leaned over the girl's shoulder, eyes wide. My God," he whispered. This could change everything." The girl traced a line on one of the maps, small finger following the route the man had used to conceal the evidence. "He left clues," she explained softly. "I just had to see them the right way. Titan knew too. He followed me." Titan barked once sharply, almost as if to punctuate her words. The man, still kneeling, swallowed hard. I can't believe this," he said. You're just a child." The girl's voice, calm and unwavering, cut through the tension. I remembered. You didn't hide it well enough." Her parents exchanged glances, pride, fear, and disbelief colliding in a whirlwind of emotion. The mother's hands shook as she adjusted her grip on the rabbit. The father's eyes were wide, riveted to the scene before him. They had always known their daughter was special, but this was beyond anything they could have imagined. The officers carefully collected the papers, securing the evidence while keeping the girl and Titan at the center of attention. Every adult instinct in the room recognized the improbable reality. The child had led the discovery, the dog had followed her lead, and together they had uncovered a network of deceit that no professional had been able to unravel. And yet, even as the evidence was gathered, the girl's voice cut through the tense air once more. "There's still more, he's not finished." Titan growled, body tense, ears forward. The officers stiffened, realizing that the chase and the uncovering of secrets was far from over. The man, face pale and desperate, knew the truth. He had underestimated a toddler and a dog, and now there was no hiding from the consequences. The girl's mother knelt beside her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her daughter's face. "Honey, are you sure?" she whispered. The girl nodded, tiny, determined, her eyes fierce. "I saw everything. We have to follow it to the end." The judge, still pale, adjusted his glasses, voice trembling. This is unprecedented," he murmured. "A child, a dog, leading us to uncover evidence no adult could find." The father exhaled shakily. "Whatever it is, we follow them," he said, eyes on his daughter and Titan. "We trust them." The girl smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and focus. "Then let's go," she whispered. Titan barked in agreement, tail stiff, muscles coiled for action. And in that moment, every person in the hallway understood one terrifying truth. The secret had been revealed, but the full story, the full danger, the full web of deception, was still waiting to be uncovered. Suspense hook. Who else was involved in hiding the evidence? How far did the scheme reach? And what dangers awaited the girl, Titan, and the adults who followed them next? The uncovering of the secret was only the beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. The moment the hidden evidence was finally secured, the courthouse erupted into controlled chaos. Phones rang endlessly, journalists typed frantically on laptops, and security officers hustled to cordon off the hallway where the toddler and Titan had led them. Every adult present, lawyers, judges, investigators, moved with a mix of awe and disbelief, trying to process the sheer improbability of what had just unfolded. Outside the courthouse, news vans blared their horns, cameras trained on the imposing columns, and reporters relayed breathless updates to live audiences. Social media exploded with fragments of video clips. A 3-year-old leading a massive K9 through the building, stopping at vents, pointing to hidden boxes, and uncovering evidence that had baffled professionals for months. The hashtags trended almost instantly. #ToddlerDetective, K9 Hero, Courthouse Mystery, sending the story viral before anyone could even piece together the full details. Inside, the father held his daughter close, trying to shield her from the overwhelming attention, but she remained calm, eyes bright and alert, fully aware of the significance of her discovery. Titan, massive and loyal, sat beside her, tail flicking cautiously, muscles still coiled as if expecting another surprise around the corner. The girl's mother clutched the rabbit tightly, tears streaming down her face, caught between pride, fear, and awe. The judge, still visibly shaken, raised his gavel in an attempt to restore order. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice tight with disbelief, "I have presided over countless cases in my career, but I must acknowledge that what we have witnessed today is unprecedented." His eyes swept the room, finally settling on the girl and Titan. "This child and this K9 have uncovered evidence that could have taken professionals months to locate." A murmur of astonishment swept through the courtroom. Even seasoned attorneys, usually unmoved by spectacle, felt the weight of the moment pressing against their ribs. One defense attorney muttered under his breath, "I've never seen anything like this. Not in my 20 years." The girl glanced at Titan, brushing her tiny fingers against his neck. "He helped me," she said softly. "We saw it together." Titan growled low, almost in agreement, and nudged her gently with his massive head. The father, still trying to catch his breath, whispered to his wife, "Can you believe this? She did it." His voice trembled with awe, tinged with fear of what they had just stumbled into. Meanwhile, the man who had hidden the evidence was led away in handcuffs, flanked by officers. His face was pale, sweat running down his temples, eyes darting nervously from the girl to Titan. He had underestimated them both, and now the consequences were unfolding rapidly. The reporters, not missing a single detail, captured every expression, every movement, broadcasting the scene live to thousands of viewers. But the girl wasn't finished. Even as adults scrambled to manage the fallout, she tugged gently at Titan's collar, eyes scanning the courthouse for the next clue. "There's more," she whispered. "He didn't finish hiding everything." The judge's eyes widened. "More," he repeated, voice tight. Do you understand the implications?" The girl nodded. "I saw it. Titan can smell it too. We just have to follow." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. They were trained to deal with evidence, to handle suspects, to maintain order. But nothing in their training had prepared them for a 3-year-old directing a search and a K9 responding with precision. They nodded slowly, realizing that if they wanted to recover all the evidence, they would have to trust the child and the dog. Outside, social media continued to explode. Clips of the girl and Titan, shot from multiple angles, were shared and reshared. News outlets speculated on the uncanny coordination between the toddler and the K9. Experts in law enforcement and child development weighed in live, debating how a 3-year-old could possess such awareness and intuition. Comments ranged from disbelief to adoration. "This is incredible. How is this possible? A real-life detective toddler." Back in the hallway, the girl led Titan toward another corridor, her tiny hands brushing against walls and floors, tracing faint marks left by the desperate man. The officers followed cautiously, aware of the delicate balance between protection and interference. Every step carried suspense. Every turn could reveal more evidence or lead them into danger. The father whispered to his wife, voice tight, "I never imagined our daughter. She's extraordinary." His words were cut short as Titan stopped suddenly, nose twitching, ears forward, tail stiff. The girl knelt beside him, eyes narrowing. "He's near," she whispered. "I can feel it." The mother swallowed hard. "Are you sure? What if it's dangerous?" The girl shook her head, small face serious. "I have to. Titan helps me. We have to finish." They reached a small room at the end of the hallway. The door was locked, simple enough to seem inconsequential, but Titan sniffed it intently, growled softly, and pawed at the frame. The girl held out her small hands, brushing against Titan's fur. "We have to open it," she whispered. An officer stepped forward cautiously, unlocking the door while keeping the toddler safely behind him. The door creaked open, revealing a room stacked with crates and boxes. Titan's nose twitched, the girl's eyes widened. This was it, the final cache. The girl knelt beside a box, tiny hands moving carefully over the tape and dust. "This is everything," she whispered. "All the hiding places, all the proof." Titan growled softly, tail stiff, as if warning that danger still lingered. The officers began cataloging the contents, carefully removing papers, photographs, and documents that revealed a massive web of deception, embezzlement, and corruption. The man who had tried to conceal it all had underestimated a child and a dog, and now the full extent of his schemes was being laid bare. The father crouched beside his daughter, eyes brimming with pride. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it." The girl smiled faintly, brushing her rabbit against Titan's massive flank. "We did it," she corrected softly. "Titan and I." The mother hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "My brave little girl," she whispered. "My hero." The judge, standing nearby, finally spoke, voice tinged with awe and disbelief. This is unprecedented," he said. "Never in my career have I witnessed such courage, intelligence, and collaboration between a child and a K9. The courtroom and the courthouse staff were still processing what had happened, but outside, the world was already reacting. Social media continued to erupt, news vans broadcast live, and viewers around the country were captivated by the story of the toddler detective and the heroic K9. Clips of the girl pointing, Titan following her lead, and the moment they uncovered the hidden evidence were replayed endlessly. And yet, despite the acclaim, the girl remained focused. "We're not finished," she whispered to Titan. "He's still out there. We have to make sure everything is safe." Titan barked softly, alert and ready. The officers nodded, understanding that the final phase of the investigation would require patience, vigilance, and perhaps a little more guidance from the toddler who had already done the impossible. The father whispered to his wife, voice low, "I never thought a child could teach adults how to lead." His eyes were wide, filled with a mix of pride, fear, and awe. The mother nodded, gripping her daughter's hands tightly. "We have to trust her and Titan." The girl looked up, tiny face serious. "Then let's go," she whispered. Titan barked in agreement, tail flicking, muscles coiled. And in that moment, every adult present understood one terrifying truth. The fallout was only beginning, the story would spread farther than anyone could imagine, and the child and the dog were at the center of a mystery and a danger that had no clear end. Suspense hook: how far did the corruption reach? Who else was involved? And what dangers awaited the toddler and Titan as the investigation reached its climax? The world was watching, and the story was far from over. The final hallway of the courthouse felt heavier than ever, charged with tension, anticipation, and fear. Titan's massive paws padded silently across the polished floor, ears forward, tail stiff, muscles coiled for any sudden movement. The toddler, rabbit tucked under her arm and evidence bundle in her small hands, followed closely, tiny feet shuffling with focus and determination. Behind them, officers and courthouse staff moved cautiously, a tight formation of adults trailing the child who had led them all this far. Every heartbeat in the hallway echoed like a drumbeat of impending confrontation. The father whispered to his wife, voice trembling, "I can't believe this. She's actually leading us to the final proof." His eyes were fixed on his daughter, admiration and fear intertwined. The mother swallowed hard, clinging to her child's hand, aware that the stakes had grown exponentially with every step. Ahead, the shadowy end of the hallway gave way to a large storage room, doors slightly ajar, revealing a flicker of movement. The man who had orchestrated months of deception crouched inside, face pale and drawn, hands shaking. Papers, boxes, and digital storage devices were strewn across the floor, the remnants of a carefully concealed network of corruption laid bare. He froze when he saw them, the massive K9 poised like a guardian and the tiny girl calm, resolute, eyes blazing with understanding beyond her years. How did you?" he stammered. Panic flared in his eyes. The girl's voice was steady, commanding, though soft in tone. I remembered. You hid it all, but Titan, he saw too." Titan growled, a deep, resonant sound that made the man flinch. The officers advanced cautiously, guns holstered but ready, eyes locked on the room, aware that even a single misstep could spark danger. The man's shoulders slumped slightly. He had underestimated a child and a dog, and now the consequences were closing in. The girl stepped forward, small hands brushing against the edge of a box. "Everything ends here," she whispered, almost as if affirming a decision she had made long before anyone else arrived. Titan shifted slightly, massive head lowering in agreement, tail flicking with restrained energy. The father whispered, voice hoarse with emotion, She's incredible. Nothing I've seen compares." The mother's lips trembled as she nodded, unable to find words for the mixture of pride and fear swelling in her chest. The man stammered, trying to recover some semblance of control. You don't understand what you're holding. This isn't just documents. This is proof that could ruin people far more dangerous than me. If this gets out," his voice trailed off, eyes darting nervously to the officers, to the girl, to Titan. The girl knelt, small fingers brushing over the papers, inspecting photographs and documents with precision. "I know," she said softly. "I saw everything. You can't hide anymore. And Titan, he won't let you escape." Titan barked once, sharply, a warning and declaration, sending the man into a trembling panic. The officers moved in swiftly, securing him while keeping the toddler and the K9 at the forefront, recognizing that they were the ones who had uncovered everything. The man was led away in handcuffs, muttering incoherently about schemes and secrets, powerless against the unlikely duo who had exposed him. As the last handcuffs clicked into place, the girl carefully placed the evidence bundles onto a nearby table. Her small hands trembled slightly from exhaustion and adrenaline, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the papers one last time. Titan remained close, massive frame alert, ears twitching, tail stiff but relaxed enough to signal the danger had passed. The officers cataloged the evidence, carefully sealing it for chain of custody, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted. It wasn't just law enforcement or legal procedure anymore. It was awe, respect, and a recognition that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The father knelt beside his daughter, voice thick with emotion. You changed everything. You saved us from months of uncertainty, from danger." The mother hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My brave girl, my little hero," she whispered. "I don't even know how to thank you." The girl hugged her mother back, Rabbit still tucked under her arm, and whispered, "Titan helped me. We did it together." The massive dog leaned gently into her, as if affirming her words. Outside, news vans broadcast live. Social media exploded with footage of the toddler detective and her heroic K9, hashtags trending worldwide. Viewers were captivated by the sheer improbability of the story. A 3-year-old and a dog uncovering evidence that had baffled investigators, stopping a man's attempts at hiding a dangerous network, and leading law enforcement to a final, decisive confrontation. Back inside, the judge stepped forward, his expression a mix of disbelief and respect. "In all my years on the bench," he said, voice steady but trembling slightly, "I have never witnessed such courage, such intuition, such precision. This child and this dog have changed the course of justice in a way that defies explanation." The girl looked up at him, small face serious. "I just saw what he did," she whispered. "Titan helped me. We knew where to find it." The judge nodded slowly, eyes misting. "Sometimes the smallest among us can do the greatest things," he said. "You have our admiration, our gratitude, and I believe history will remember what you've done today." The officers escorted the last pieces of evidence out of the room, ensuring nothing was overlooked. The man who had hidden the materials was taken to a secure holding area, the weight of his crimes finally catching up to him. And through it all, the girl and Titan remained at the center, calm, composed, yet aware of the enormity of what they had accomplished. Her parents finally stepped closer, wrapping her in a protective embrace. "You are remarkable," her father said softly, "more than we ever could have imagined, more than anyone could have imagined." The mother nodded, still clutching the rabbit tightly. "We've always known you were special, but this is beyond words. You've changed lives today, including our own." The girl smiled faintly, small face glowing with pride and exhaustion. "We did it together," she said again, patting Titan gently. The dog barked softly, nuzzling her shoulder. For the first time in hours, the tension in the courthouse lifted. Officers, reporters, and staff exhaled collectively, realizing that the immediate danger had passed. But the story, the tale of a toddler, a dog, and the unraveling of a hidden conspiracy, was only beginning to ripple through the world. The father whispered, eyes scanning the room, voice low but filled with awe, I think this will be remembered forever." The mother nodded, tears still streaming. Not just remembered, celebrated. She and Titan, they saved the day. The girl clutched her rabbit tightly, looking around at the people who had watched her work, and whispered softly, "We just followed what we saw." Titan barked once, affirming the truth of her words, tail flicking lazily now, muscles relaxing. The improbable pair, the toddler and the dog, had done the impossible, guided by instinct, courage, and an unshakable bond. The judge, placing a hand gently on the girl's shoulder, said, "Today, you taught all of us a lesson. Courage, intuition, and determination know no age. And sometimes the smallest voices can reveal the biggest truths." As the sun began to set outside the courthouse, golden light spilling into the tall windows, the world seemed to pause in recognition. Cameras captured the tableau. The toddler, rabbit clutched tightly, standing proudly beside Titan, officers behind them, the evidence secured, and the man who had hidden it all led away. The story would go viral, dominate headlines, and be remembered for years to come, not just for the hidden corruption revealed, but for the courage, intuition, and heroism of a 3-year-old girl and her K9 companion. And in that moment, as the courthouse slowly returned to normal, one truth remained undeniable. Some heroes come in the smallest forms, yet leave the largest impact. Suspense, closure, and emotional hook. The threat was neutralized, the evidence secured, and justice set in motion. But the bond between the child and Titan, the lessons they taught the adults around them, and the awe of the impossible would linger long after the cameras stopped rolling. The world had witnessed a real-life story of courage, intuition, and bravery that defied expectations, and the legend of the toddler detective and her K-9 hero had only just begun.